In this video, we're going to look at creating a different project in a Visual Studio solution. This one is going to be for C#. So let's start off looking at the Python that we've done so far. I'm going to leave that little test file. Actually, to tell you the truth, I guess I'm going to leave that alone. Okay, so what we have is we have our data processor class. And this is from like module 9. It's got our constructor, and it's got our properties, and it's got our methods, and a stub out for a possible database one in the future. We also have a person class. And we have the employee class, which inherits from the person class and the persons module. So what I want to do is I want to show how all the training you've had in this class will kind of relate to other languages as well. You may choose to go on and do more Python. You may choose Java. You may choose C#. Any of those choices, though, this introduction or foundations of programming should help prepare you for that. So this hopefully will give you a little bit of confidence. Okay, so I'll start off by right-clicking on the solution and asking it to add me another project. Actually, it looks like I need to move it over a little bit so you guys can see it. Right-click on the solution, add a new project, and this time I'll choose a C# project, and I want to make it pretty close to what we have here, so I'm going to go ahead and choose a console application. That's about as close as we're going to get to our, what our Python code does natively. So console applications are the ones that run in the command prompt, the shell. So I'm going to just call it, I don't know, console application demo. Okay, so now we've got a program file with CS instead of PY on there. And the code in C# uses a lot of curly braces, where in Python we don't. We just use indentation. In fact, it's indented here. There's a class it made called program. This method here is indented, but it doesn't really have to be. It just makes it easier to read. I think that's why the people in Python decided if you're going to indent it anyway to make it easier to read, why not just get rid of the curly braces? So that was their choice. In C#, it's a lot more straightforward as far as, not more visual as far as when you're seeing the end and beginning of something. I don't know, it's a preference. When a C# console application runs, it will look for the main method, and when it finds it, it'll go ahead and start running that. You can see it's in the program class. So all your code is going to start from here, just kind of like we have the main module in Python. In C#, you go ahead and indicate what data type you like. In Python, it chooses it for you, but here you're explicit. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want a string, and the square brackets here indicate I want a tuple. Well, we call them arrays in C#, but it's basically a tuple. And arguments is the name of the parameter, and that's just pick up those command line arguments like we did in Python. So you remember that we passed in command line arguments. I would be able to pick it up from here. So I would be able to go through and say, okay, args 0 could be printed out. Now we don't really have a print statement, so to speak. This is kind of what it would look like in Python. In C# it would be console.writeLine, or write line as the carriage return, And then you end your statement with a semicolon. So instead of a print statement, we use console.writeLine. We always put a semicolon. We keep the curly braces. But, you know, although there are a lot of differences, I think you can kind of see the similarities. Now, let's go ahead and look at creating another class in the same project. For this example, I'm going to go ahead and make a person class. So I will come up here to the console application. I will right-click on it and add. Oh, there we go again. I got to move it over. Right-click and add a new item. And I'm going to choose a class file. I'm going to call the class file person. And from our person class in C#, we have our constructor, and we have a first name attribute, and we have our property procedures, and we have the toString method. So in C#, it's going to look really similar. So we're going to go through and say public, to indicate that it's available publicly, person. Actually, I'm going to call the file person. I'm going to call the class person, kind of like we did in Python. And then this is going to be my constructor. And the way they do it in C# is if it's got the same name, if the method's got the same name as the class, then it must be the constructor. That's kind of the way they figure it. And I want some fields, so I'm going to go ahead and say I want a string for the person's first name. And I'll set it to blank, just kind of because we did that before. And so I'd make an argument for string first name and my constructor, and then I'd just go ahead and say str first name is equal to first name when somebody creates a new one. Now, I haven't done some C# in weeks, so maybe I should go ahead and test to see if I've got this right. If I build the project, it should do a syntax check and give me some information about whether things worked. Build started. Build succeeded, so yes, it looks like I've got the code right. And just like before, I can use a little test to see if it's going to work, such as, I think I'll just go through and make a new person object. So person dot obj p equals a new person. And that's the syntax to create an object. Remember, this is they're telling me I have to have a first name in there. Okay, Bob. We do have default values too, so I could have done that, I just didn't. And then that's pretty much it. Now, obj p dot, and you can't see the first name field in there because if it's private. So if I print this out, I'll go ahead and run this program. To run the program, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on the console project. I'm going to tell Visual Studio that I want to make that the startup project. You'll notice that when I do, it turns bold. And now I'll go ahead and I'm going to start by coming up here to debug and say start debugging or start without debugging. Actually, start without debugging is probably the choice I want. The reason for that is if I do start with debugging, it will open and immediately close. Without debugging, it does this. And you can see it, the default behavior of toString, so they have a toString here in CSharp, just like they do in Python. The default behavior of toString is just to print out the name of the class. Kind of similar to what we saw in Python as well. Okay, so my class is kind of working, but it needs some more stuff. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a property procedure. Now, Visual Studio has got some really nice features. For one thing, one thing I do like is they know that you're likely to go through and create a property procedure for it. So I'm going to go through and create a property procedure. And I'll do that by making a getter and setter. Now I could have typed this out, but I'm lazy. So public string, and I'm going to go ahead and call it just first name. And when you ask for it, it's going to return the first name. That's the get part. And if you want to set it, it's going to set it with whatever value you pass in. The value is actually implied. That's the get part, or set part. So this is my property procedure. In Python, that's my property. And in CSharp, we don't use a pound sign, we use a couple slashes. So here's my constructor. And here's my field. Kind of similar, huh? I like this collapsing feature too. It's kind of nice because it gets things out of the way. Okay, so what else do we have? Oh, we had some methods we wanted to use. So we had the toString method, and I showed you that there's already a toString method built. So I'm going to go ahead and make the method down here. And make it a public method. It's going to return a string, and it's going to be called toString. And in .NET, or in CSharp I should say, it is hiding a inherited, I don't know if you can see this, let me zoom in. It's hiding the inherited member object toString, so I need to override it. And so I should put in the word override. And then finally, I need to return something, which would be return, in this case, first name. Again, here's the Python version. I don't have to put self in CSharp. It just assumes that. You don't have to do that. You don't have to document it. But other than that, it's working. And the implicit toString is actually called toString, so that's why I had to override it. Well, that's it. I think we've got a person class now. So if I come back over to my main method and I ask it to fill up Bob, it will go ahead and do so, and then print out using the toString method. Debug, start without debugging. And this time it prints Bob. So I think you'll have to agree with me. There is a lot of similarities here. Let's see if I can make this big enough to actually be of use, small enough that you can actually see. Okay, so actually, if I get a little bit more real estate here, I think we'll do better. That's not too bad. Cool. I think that'll help. Okay, so here's our our fields are implied in C#. You can do that in, excuse me, our fields are implied in with the attributes in Python. You can actually do something like that in C# as well. They do have the same kind of mechanism, but kind of like I did in Python, I kind of like the actual using a visible field. Personal choice. In Python, we use the initialize underscore underscore init underscore underscore to indicate it's a constructor. In C#, we just use whatever the name of the class is. That's the name of the method. That means it's a constructor. We don't have to use the word self. We can actually go ahead and use a default value if you want. And then as far as going through, I can set the field like underscore first name. That's setting the invisible field. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. So that's similar. I didn't make a counter here. As far as the property procedures, we have the get and set. So the first one's a get, second one's a set. In C#, it's similar. I think it's a little easier to read myself. It's just the name of your property, and then the get and set is inside, and .NET figures out that, oh yes, that's a property procedure, and so now you've got your getter and setter piece in there. And just like in Python, I can go ahead and put in validation code in here, or formatting code up here in the getter part. And as far as in the method, the toString is very similar. So I think you can see that your training in Python has prepared you well for picking another language if you want beyond Python. So we do have at the UW the Python certificate that you can use. My other classes, like at Bellevue, they also have other classes in Python. Some of the other schools, not as much, but we do certainly have at all the schools additional classes in Java and C# and the like. So there's lots of choices out there before you. I really wanted to give you a good foundation of programming using Python in this quarter, and hopefully this little demonstration has kind of given you an idea of how much you have learned and how much can even be applied to something perhaps you've never even seen, such as a completely different language, and even in this case in a different development environment. And with luck, that's given you some confidence to go forward and make some additional choices for what you want to learn next. Okay, I think that's good for this video, and I will talk to you later.